Hello everybody, welcome to another Puppy School Q&A. My name's Nicole Harris and this week I'm going to be talking about the topics of coprophagia, or poo eating, and pica, which is the eating of non-edible items. So thank you to everybody who sent in a question via Facebook. We had a lot of you this week, so there's a lot of questions to get through. So I will get going straight away and try and give you as much information on this topic as possible. But as always, if you've got any other questions, please do pop your questions in the comments below and someone will get back to you ASAP. So let's start off with the delightful topic of coprophagia, or eating poo. So there's a couple of things just to start off with. The first thing is to be aware that it is quite a normal behaviour, particularly for puppies. Usually starts off as just a general exploratory behaviour. Puppies sort of just go around and sniff it. And it's just a bit of harmless investigation, but then it can develop into eating it. And unfortunately, because for dogs, poo can taste quite nice. It actually can be a self-reinforcing behaviour. So they eat the poo, it tastes nice, that makes them want to do it again. So it can be a little bit difficult, a little bit tricky to work with, but we'll talk about some various different techniques to help you with this. So there are a few things that we do need to think about in terms of what might be causing it, because there are some things that may be causing it that you do need to deal with before we do any training. So for example, if we've got a puppy who maybe has a gastro issue, so something that means that they're not absorbing all their nutrients properly, then that's definitely something that needs to be checked out by a vet. Also, if they have internal parasites, that can also lead to poo eating as well. So making sure they're on a good worming protocol, and particularly if their poos are soft or if they've got a lot of undigested food in them when they're pooing, or if you see fat in the poo, or if the frequency of the poo has increased, so the amount that they're pooing, or if their appetite has increased. Any of those things might be a sign that they just need a little vet check, just to make sure there's nothing going on that could be causing the poo eating that's medically related, and a vet should be able to help you with that. The other thing to think about is nutrition. So again, if a puppy isn't getting the nutrition they need, that can lead to the ingestion of poo as well, unfortunately. Now, nutrition is a bit of a minefield in terms of a topic, and it's not something that I am fully qualified to talk about. So I will go through a few little bits, but again, something to maybe chat with your vet or a nutrition specialist about. So the things we need to think about is if your puppy is underfed, so if they're hungry, they are more likely to try and seek food items, which unfortunately poo can be considered. The thing I always say to people is just be careful about what is how much you're feeding, because as puppies grow, their needs to eat is increased. So don't always just go on what's on the back of the packet. That is just a recommendation and isn't always the right amount for your individual puppy. I know certainly for my dog, when she was growing up, the amount on the back of the packet that she was eating, it just wasn't enough, so we had to feed her more. So definitely if they're being underfed, that can lead to an issue. Also being overfed as well. So if they're eating too much, obviously they're not going to be digesting everything. And then as they poo, a lot of undigested material is going to pass through in their faeces. So particularly if you've got a puppy that's eating their own poo, could be a sign that there's some undigested material in their own poo that they're just eating because it tastes quite nice. So we also need to think about their diet in terms of, is it a balanced diet? So beware of products that say they are a complete diet. Complete just means that they contain the right nutrients, but it doesn't mean that they are in the correct amounts. So you do want a balanced diet. That's really, really important. You can have a puppy on a very high quality diet, but if it's not balanced, then they're not getting all the nutrients they need in the right amounts. So that's something to think about as well. And so some of the things that can help are just making sure that they are eating a digestible meal. So the other thing to think about, there are certain foods which are more easily digestible than others. So if we think about sort of fish versus red meats, fish is more easily digestible. So we do want to make sure that a puppy is finding their food easy to digest. Now, one of the sort of the old wives' tales that gets talked about quite a lot with coprophagia is feeding a dog pineapple with their food. Now, pineapple contains an enzyme that breaks down protein and can help make it more easily digestible. So In theory, if you had a puppy that was eating their own poo, and that was because they were not digesting their food properly, and the poo that was coming out the other end was sort of quite palatable, by eating pineapple, what that does is that's just going to help them to digest that protein a little bit better. It's going to mean that they're absorbing those nutrients more, and it also means that in theory, the poo that comes out the other end should be less palatable. The other product that is available is there are food supplements that contain thiamine, which is vitamin B1, which again is a product or a vitamin that has been shown to have useful effects on coprophagia behaviours as well. So there's some things to think about in terms of nutrition. Like I say, I'm not a nutrition expert, so it is really important to speak to someone, perhaps your vet, who might be able to give you further advice on that, but definitely something to think about. So then we need to look at, well, okay, why might a puppy be eating poo then? So what might have caused the behaviour? So there are a couple of things to sort of look at. The first is if a puppy's been brought up in unsanitary conditions. So unfortunately, puppy farm puppies, a lot of the time they are bred in an environment where there's a lot of poo around. So what happens is that they just kind of become really attracted to feces because it's the only fun thing in their environment, and they also associate it with all the things that are good in their life. So they eat food, the smell of feces around. They nurse from their mother, the smell of feces is around. When they start to explore their environment, feces are around. So it becomes a really, really important part of their life, unfortunately. So that's one thing to think about. If we've had a puppy farm puppy, that might predispose them to be more likely to eat poo. Boredom as well, that's another thing. So particularly, again, unfortunately, puppies raised in a barren environment like puppy farms, or also dogs that are kennelled for long periods of time, that can lead to this behaviour. So we end up with dogs that, particularly if they have inadequate exercise and mental stimulation, that's going to lead to them wanting to eat poo. Environmental stress is another thing that can lead to coprophagia as well. So anything which causes a change in routine that might cause a little bit of stress. So one thing to think about at the moment, we are all going through a tremendous change in routine, and there is probably a high level of stress going on at the moment in most households in the UK. So an increase in this behaviour is not unforeseen, particularly if it's something that's happened in the past. But the big thing that I really want to talk about is attention seeking, because for a lot of puppies, what starts off as exploratory behaviour, so they go along, they sniff the poo, they probably were just going to have sniff it, and then that was going to be it. But all of a sudden their owner comes over and says, oh, no, you mustn't sniff that, you mustn't go near that. Instantly the puppy learns, oh, okay, well, this behaviour, sniffing and being around this poo, that leads to my owner paying attention to me. And what can happen is then the puppy might start to ingest the behaviour, and it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. The puppy ingests the poo, the owner pays more attention to it, eating the poo becomes a way of being able to gain attention from the owner, and we then have a learned behaviour. So we do need to look at why the behaviour has started and how we can manage that. But one of the main things with this behaviour, the first thing is to prevent it from being practiced as much as possible, because it is such a reinforcing behaviour. Eating poo is quite, unfortunately for puppies, tasty. So we do want to prevent it as much as we can. We do want to make sure that we're responding appropriately, so we're not paying attention to it, we're not making a massive fuss about it, and we're definitely not telling our puppies off as well for doing it, because that can just cause them to just want to eat it as quickly as possible. But the other thing that can really help is teaching a really solid or reliable leave or drop cue. So leave would mean don't put it in your mouth in the first place. So if your puppy is moving over towards a poo on the side of the road or in the woods, they move towards it, you say leave. What that means is they need to come away and they get a nice little reward from you. That is a separate behaviour to what I call the drop. So if they've already got something in their mouth, if we ask them to drop, that means we want them to spit out the item that's in their mouth, and they're going to get rewarded for that. So because we've got a lot to go through today, I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of how to teach those behaviours, but that is certainly something to get in touch with your local puppy school tutor to help you out with those if you haven't learned how to teach those to your puppy already. But they do need to be very reliable. So what I mean by that is it's not just a question of teaching the very basics of the behaviour. We do need to teach our puppy to leave not just little bits of kibble on the floor, or small little things, or if we give them a toy, they need to drop it those are what we call quite low value items. We do need to teach our puppies to be able to do those behaviours in very exciting circumstances. So teaching a puppy to leave a little bit of kibble on the floor is very different to teaching a puppy to leave a big pile of horse poo that they've come across in the woods. Teaching a puppy to drop their toy in play is very, very different to teaching a puppy to drop a cat poo that they've just picked up off the floor. So in order to teach those behaviours reliably, they need lots of practice and gradually increasing the difficulty level. So again, like I say, something to perhaps speak to your local puppy school tutor about if you need help with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go through some of the questions that popped up on the Facebook page, just related to coprophagia, so specifically the poo eating side of things. So bear with me because there were quite a few, so I'm just going to have to scroll through and find them all. So I believe the first one was from, from Tasha. So Tasha, my 7-month-old puppy doesn't eat his own poo, but when out on walks he will eat other dogs or foxes or any other animal's poo. Why does he do this? I've tried stopping this, but he's so quick. Will this stop? He's also nicked a few of my son's wet or dirty nappies whilst I'm mid-change. I worry the crystals in the nappy will harm him. He does poo them out, but how do I stop this? So yes, so that's definitely something we need to be careful of, because obviously while poo in general is not harmful, obviously ingesting nappies potentially is going to cause a blockage. So we do want to basically work on that. So unfortunately, eating dog's poo and fox's poo, there isn't an awful lot that we can do to prevent that in terms of stopping how exciting it is, because they are going to taste really nice. So prevention, a lot of this is going to be about management, like I talked about earlier, preventing access to those things. So it might be that you just need to pop your puppy on lead for a little while until you've taught a really, really good leave or drop cue. And I would probably work on the leave cue a little bit more than drop, because really we want to stop them from putting it in their mouth in the first place if we can help it. So for when you're out and about, management by keeping them on lead until you've taught a really good leave cue, and then once you know that you've got a really solid leave cue, puppy can be allowed off lead, and if they go near any poo, what you can do is you can say leave, and then when they come away they get a nice reward. What you do want to do is you want to try not to get into that habit of rushing towards puppy when they're trying to put a poo in their mouth, because that's actually going to potentially make the problem worse and going to make them want to ingest it. You said that he does it really, really quickly, so that might be because you've been rushing towards him. When it comes to eating dirty nappies, my suggestion there would be pure management. What I would do there is either pop puppy out of the way, so somewhere different, so behind a baby gate or behind a door while you're doing the change. Or if your puppy knows a good settle or a go to bed, teaching them to remain or stay on a specific mat or a specific place just while you do the nappy changing is a really, really useful skill for your puppy to learn. So really focusing on what you'd prefer them to do rather than them getting involved in the nappy changing. So those would be my little suggestions to you, Tasha. We've got a question from, where are we? Kelly Cooper. So cat poo, she says cat poo all the time. No matter how fast I'm checking, if there's any in the garden, he will find it and he will eat the lot. Yes, so unfortunately cat poo is very, very appetizing to puppies because of the high protein level. It's just very, very palatable. So again, it's one of those things where trying to discourage them from eating it is really, really difficult, because it's like someone turning around to me and saying don't eat chocolate cake. It is a really, really difficult thing to do. What the best thing you can do is try and manage it. So you don't mention it. It sounds like this is cat poo in your garden. So the first thing I would do is be going out into the garden and picking it up if you can before puppy goes out there. That would be a good way of managing it. Or having puppy on lead while you're out in the garden. That would be another way of dealing with it. You say that he spends a lot of time sort of looking for it and trying to eat it. So the other thing that you could do with your puppy is just starting to teach them that there are other activities that they can do in the garden other than seeking cat poo. So if going out into the garden becomes this like, oh, going into the garden means I get to play this game where I get to eat cat poo and I'm searching for it and that's my main objective, that's going to become a little bit of a habit. So potentially what you could try instead is teaching him to play foraging games in the garden, looking for things that aren't cat poo. So hiding treats or hiding his favourite toys, and getting him to look for those items instead. So just directing that behaviour onto something a little bit more appropriate might be the way forward. But yeah, cat poo, not nice, unfortunately. We had another question from, I do apologise if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, Raunak Amatia. My puppy is around 3 or 4 months. He will always eat his own poop. Is there any solution for this behaviour? So because there's not a lot of information there, what I would suggest is it's worth just going back to all the things I mentioned before. So have we made sure that there's definitely nothing medical going on? So we've got a good worming protocol. Have we had a vet check to make sure there's no gastro issues? Nothing that suggests from his poo that there's something going on. Might be worth getting a vet check just in case. Are we on a good nutritious diet and are we being fed the appropriate amounts? Sometimes it's definitely worthwhile with puppies feeding them multiple small meals a day to make sure they don't get hungry as well. So that might be something that's worthwhile doing. So I would usually suggest 3 to 4 meals a day for a young puppy. I don't know why there seems to be this temptation for people to want to reduce it down to 1 or 2 meals a day. And I always say to people, well, I would struggle. I get hangry if I eat anything less than 3 meals a day. So, I do think that our dogs do need to especially young puppies, do need to eat 3 to 4 meals a day. That's definitely better for them, especially with something like this. But then obviously, like I say, preventing access to the poo so that we can make sure that we're not practicing that behaviour, because every time it gets practiced, it becomes a habit because it's a very reinforcing behaviour. It's a very nice thing, unfortunately, for puppies to do. And again, teaching a really solid leave or drop cue. Just those are the things you want to be sort of thinking about to make sure that we can prevent that from continuing if we can. And the last little question with regards to coprophagia was from Louise Taylor. So she says, my puppy enjoys snacking on poo she finds in the garden. We have 5 dogs and she always manages to find a bit I've missed. Sometimes she brings it into the house carrying it like a cigar. I exchange it for treats. Is there anything I can do to discourage her from picking them up in the first place? So, what I would say, unfortunately, is there's not an awful lot that we can do to discourage them from picking it up, apart from management and preventing it just so that it doesn't become a habit. So I don't know if there is the way... Obviously, you are obviously picking up the poo. It's just she's finding the bits that you're missing. So I don't know whether there is maybe a way that you can segregate a part of the garden for your puppy that's separate to the older dogs, just so that she can't get into the habit of practicing that behaviour. That might be one way around it. The other thing that I would just pick up on there, obviously you're doing a really good job of exchanging the poo for treats. So starting to teach what we'd call the drop cue. So starting to do a nice little swap behaviour. What I do sometimes find is that some puppies learn very quickly, if I pick up this item and I bring it to you and I drop it, then I get a treat. So they do what we call backward chaining. Tends to be the very bright puppies that pick these things up. So there's nothing wrong with that. My personal opinion is I would rather a puppy bring me an item and drop it than swallow it, especially with something like poo. But just be mindful that by doing that training, what we could end up with is a puppy that is just learning to pick it up and bring it into you and say, look, hey, I've got this thing. Please can I have my reward now? So that's the only other things just that I would pick up from that. So those were all the things to do with coprophagia and eating poo. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to stop there and I'm going to do a separate video on the topic of pica. And other, because we've got a lot of questions today and I'm just very mindful that I don't want this to go on for too long. So what I'll do is I'll stop this video for now, and what I'll do is I'll upload another video on the other topic a little bit later. So thank you very much. If you've got any questions with regards to coprophagia, please do pop them in the comments below, and I will be back a little bit later with the next instalment so we can talk about pica. All right, thank you, bye.